welcome to another courageous conversation. For this conversation, we're going to kind of keep things light and talk about a lot of different things. We're going to talk about things ranging from grief to traumatic grief to anxiety to depression. And wherever the conversation goes, let's take it there. That way we kind of give everyone who's watching a variety of different things to process and think about. So as you all know, we are Courageous Healing, Inc., a team of mental health and social work individuals who are called to healing. We're all about providing culturally competent mental health services, and we want to help individuals work through the healing process. So I am Aaron Lane. I am the co-founder of Courageous Healing, Inc., and I am a master's level social worker.
Hi, my name is Janelle Lane. I'm a licensed mental health counselor, his partner in everything, also his spouse, co-founder of Courageous Healing as well. And I specialize in all things trauma.
Hi, I'm Frederica Rogers, and I am a master's level social worker as well.
Hi, I'm Aisha, and I am a master's level therapist.
My name is Raphael Bosley, and I am a master's level therapist.
Hi, my name is Melissa Hall. I am a master level social worker, activist, and mama.
So as we know, as individuals who have been called to the mental health and social work fields, that the experiences within mental health are vast. Individuals suffer from, again, things ranging from depression and anxiety to grief to post-traumatic stress disorder, and you can continue to name many, many things. So as we have this conversation today, let's kind of take a dive into some of those things. Obviously, things will be kind of surface level, but we'll go as deep as we need to within the conversation. So as you think back to maybe some of the clients that you've had an opportunity to serve, or even some of the things you've seen in your own experiences with family and friends, what are some of the most prevalent issues or illnesses that you've seen from a mental health perspective?
I would say for me, I've seen a lot of people who just are depressed just due to loss of motivation, hopelessness, simply because they can't necessarily articulate how they're going to get out of that funk or being stuck. So that's just been a common theme with my clients or my clientele.
I think a theme that I see the most is the family structure is broken. And then that leads to, multiple other issues.
Let's talk about that a little bit, right? Because if we even just talk about the family structure and how, as you mentioned, it's broken, then, that leads to some depression, right? So as we talk about that in itself, let's talk about the many nuances, if you will, of the family structure. And when you have a broken family structure, what that can do to the individuals within that structure, but also as a whole unit. What are thoughts around that?
Well, I see it in the population of clients that I work with, because addictions is something that you see mirrored to you, right? So your dad, when he comes home from a hard day of work, what does he do? Does he sit down? Does he have a beer? Does he light a joint? So you then take on that coping mechanism. So it's not necessarily something that you've been born with, but it's the idea that you've seen it passed down and passed down and passed down, because we're not talking about the trauma that's underlying all of those addictions, all of those coping mechanisms that we are using just to get through the next day. So I see those patterns being demonstrated over and over and over again, but at the root of it is it's trauma, unspoken trauma a lot of times.
And just to piggyback off of what you said, because I was going to say, I think the biggest thing for me is people who are like clients that are coming in that have depression or anxiety are struggling with it, but they don't even realize that that's what it is, because this is their norm. So to have these feelings and to be like, I don't really want to get up, I don't really feel like doing this. Well, sometimes I get this feeling where I have this weird feeling in my stomach and I can't breathe sometimes, and they, they don't realize, like, well, that sounds like you may be having a panic attack, or it sounds like you may have some anxiety or some depression, but this is their norm, so they don't even realize. So like you said, you come home, he's drinking a beer, okay, this is what you do. So I was gonna take the words right out of my mouth.
Yeah, it's what has been normalized by so many. Like, we feel frustrated, or we always feel anxious because that's what you do. Because everybody in my family has always been anxious because we've all experienced toxic stress, or we're growing up in, environments where barriers are normed. And so we're used to navigating trauma after trauma after trauma, and therefore everybody's always irritable or irritated or on edge. This is just a way of life. Or we don't trust because you don't trust people. What do you mean that you should trust people? Like it's breaking these maladaptive thought patterns, these patterns of behavior that have been passed down or that we've seen so normal, like they're normalized. And so I think that depression is common, anxiety is common, post-traumatic stress is common, and it's hard to know when you're experiencing symptoms that the symptoms aren't happening in isolation. So you think that you're having a hard time, you lose your appetite, you're having a hard time sleeping, you are struggling to make yourself go to work every day. You just think these things are all hard. You don't realize these are all symptoms of an overarching illness or a real actual diagnosis. And so I think that we have to start normalizing what some of these terms are. The symptoms, what to look for, conversations about it, how to ask for help. Because right now, it's a lot of people suffering in silence.
Yeah.
I think another important thing to note is these symptoms get passed on as that's just my personality, that's just who I am. All that family members may excuse other family members like, oh, that's just how she is. And really, these are symptoms of underlying trauma that has never been addressed. And we don't do our family members justice when we allow them to continue to operate in that dysfunction.
That's good. So it makes me think of how you guys talked about the normalization of certain behaviors and certain ways of being, right? And then the approval of or the passing of, oh, that's just how they are. It brings me to think about just how as people, right, it's like we always have to be okay, right? Do we have the ability to not be okay, right? Do we have first off, the awareness to know what's going on with us internally? Because what we may be showing on the outside a lot of times is not really what's going on internally. So again, that's why some of those behaviors of, oh, that's just how they are, right, gets passed off as just, it's nothing, right? They like being in their room. They don't like being around us, right? When really it's depression that they're dealing with. Or those individuals who always have this smile on their face, this happy-go-lucky smile, right? That's what mental illness kind of looks like today, right? Because of that, of always having to be okay, that always I'm strong, I'm not weak mentality or facade that we have to put on. A lot of times what happens is we put this smile on our face, we puff our chest up, and we walk around as though nothing's wrong, when in the inside we're really crawled up in a ball, if you will, or dying in the inside, suffering from these different mental illnesses.
Well, and even just listening to you say that and processing what you're talking about, it's making me think about the atypical ways that symptoms show up sometimes. So textbook anxiety is like, excessive worry about something, an inability to get that thing out of your mind, or always being worried about something bad happening. But you might not know that anxiety shows up sometimes as irritability because you're on edge. So everybody's getting on your nerves, and you think everybody's just getting on your nerves, but that could be anxiety. And so I think that it's really easy to miss certain things. It really makes me think about this concept of a strong black woman, and this facade that black women have to be so strong and so put together all the time, and where does that come from? That comes from trying to express a need and there not being space for that need. It's trying to voice something and then being questioned. Are you sure that's really what that is? Saying that you need something and there not being enough room because there's so many needs around you that you end up having to show up for other people and then submerge your needs deep down where you can't even access them yourself. And so is it a notion of black women wanting to be strong, or is it that they have to be? There's never a space where they don't have to be. And so I think we have to start looking at, what are the atypical ways this shows up? This woman looks strong and she looks, like she doesn't need anyone. She very well could be depressed.
Yeah.
She could be completely isolated and alone and feel like nobody's there for her and care for her. But here she's showing up every day for other people, and maybe sometimes a little short-tempered.
It's kind of like a functioning alcoholic.
Mhm.
And I mean, I have a question. I think it's a question. I don't know, maybe a statement. But you mentioned that Black women don't have the space. What did you say again? They didn't have the space to
Be vulnerable.
be vulnerable. So my question is, when, like, as a Black woman that has a family, when is a good time for you to say, I'm not okay? Do you feel like you have the space, even having the resources, being a therapist, do you have the space to not be okay?
Mhm.
Because you have other things that you have to
Yeah,
attend to.
thank you for that very direct and challenging question.
You can't be saying stuff like that when I'm sitting
Right.
right.
He doesn't give
Trying
me
to
the
set me
space.
up.
Yeah, I was thinking it.
No, but because I am a therapist and I'm aware, I advocate for my space.
Okay.
But I will say, even recognizing the need for space and healthy boundaries, and recognizing that I have needs and I have to assert those needs over and over and over again, because I've been socialized to put other people's needs before mine. And they've been socialized to put their needs before mine. So it's this cycle of me constantly having to advocate for myself and then being told that I'm too vocal in the process. And so I think that the way that we socialize women, particularly women of color, is painful. And it puts us in position where we constantly have to either decide to advocate for our voice, regardless if it offends, at any cost, or to absorb the cost for other people. And so I do advocate for my own needs. Not to say that it's always received, but I'm trying to teach my kids the same thing. I'm trying to teach my son that I'm a person with needs and to be sensitive to those needs, because when he has a wife, she'll value that. And I'm trying to teach my daughter, what is it that you're needing? And let's create space to hear her voice. Don't quiet her voice. What is it that you're needing? And so I'm trying to intentionally break some of those generational curses and things that have been passed down. But it is a challenging process that I have to continue to navigate. It's a dance, and I'm still learning. And I'm still learning when to advocate and how to do so equally comfortably, regardless of the audience. So I might be able to do it at home, but can I do it at the corporate table when I'm the only? And then how is it received?
Mhm.
So,
That's good.
so as therapists, do you know when you're not okay?
So I am aware of when I'm being triggered in the moment, but how I respond is different depending on what audience I'm sitting across from. So is this a safe space in which I can externally process that I'm being triggered and this is the thought process flowing through my brain? Or is this an unsafe space and I'm having to do now internal work while I'm externally processing with someone who is not safe? So the responses are different, but initially that awareness is there.
And I think for me personally, I am especially when it comes to emotions or the mental aspects of things, I'm an internal person. I don't like to express my feelings and emotions a lot. Now, in certain situations and certain things, I get so overwhelmed that it just naturally comes out. And I think sometimes the way that it comes out externally is not always what's going on internally. So it comes out as passion, it comes out as anger or defensiveness or justification or whatever whatever the term is you want to use. But sometimes internally, it's the guilt, it's the shame, it's it's those underlying issues that are going on in the inside, but it comes out differently externally, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think I'm always processing what is going on with me. How am I feeling? What am I needing? And until I got into the field, I didn't know what that answer was. I didn't have the language or the terminology to put with how I was truly feeling and how I'm feeling. So as someone who's in the field and someone who's going to school for this stuff, I can only imagine how individuals, who don't have the background, how they feel on a daily basis, and how do they then interpret what's going on with them.
But they don't
Internally.
interpret it because
Yeah.
they don't know.
Yeah.
So you're
Yeah.
just lost and you're having these things that are coming up and you don't know what to do with it. And it's like, what is happening? So you really kind of feel like you're going crazy a little bit because you're having all these feelings that you don't know how to put into words because there's no terminology for it at that point for you.
And
I
then
think
even as a therapist, like we are aware that something, like, we're not okay, but then we still do whatever that comforting behavior it is to satisfy whatever is going on. So it's kind of hard because I am aware, but I'm also aware that I'm not doing what I need to do in order to get better.
Yep.
So I think that
so you're aware of the issue and aware that you're not doing what you need to do to heal the issue.
Yes.
Then you got guilt and shame
so
around
then
that.
guilt, guilt comes
So,
up.
I would say for me, I am aware when something is wrong, but my personal struggle is, do I deserve a break?
That's good.
Because it's that silent, I would say it's just that silent, I don't even know how to say it. It's just that silent thought of, you are a therapist, so you should be able to deal with life and still function as a therapist, or whatever expectations I have pretty much made my own that society has given me. So I would say that's my thing of knowing like, hey, something is wrong, but really giving myself permission to feel and to take a break.
Yes.
And I'm still learning how to do that. So.
I would say sometimes I don't know, like when I don't know what's happening, it's because I've automatically went into the autopilot of like, I can tell I'm super stressed and I know I have a lot going on, but instead of like addressing what the problem is, it's so much easier just to be like, I'll deal with it tomorrow. So I'm like on autopilot. I'm doing everything I'm supposed to be doing. And then it's like, okay, you're going to keep ignoring it. So then I have a panic attack. And it's like, oh shoot, this is happening. So now I had to train myself to get to a place of when I can feel them coming on so I can stop them prior to. But that literally took years for me to get to that place, because before it was like they're randomly coming. I don't know why. I don't know what to do. Okay. So I think, like you said, sometimes you just go on like you don't really know, then you feel guilty. I don't even get to feel the guilt because I don't even know what's happening. I'm just autopilot, and then it's like panic attack. Okay, now I need to handle whatever is causing the stress or anxiety or whatever.
Well, and that panic attack is your body's indication that something is wrong, and your body is not going to let you ignore it. And so at the end of the day, when it comes to trauma, our body keeps a score. We can try all we want to not to feel it, but you're designed to feel it. You can't punch somebody in the face and tell them don't feel it. It's the same thing emotionally. Like when life punches you in the face, you're going to feel it. Even if you dissociate, which means get outside of your body where you're here, but you feel like you're not here. Even if you're numb, your body is going to keep the score of that trauma, and then it manifests and it comes out in different ways. And so our body will remind us to do our work. I think you said something powerful as well when you were just expressing that so much of what's happening internally, you haven't found the words to be able to match your outer experience or reaction with your inner response and reaction. I think being male and being able to articulate even that is so profound, because men are socialized not to even focus on their feelings or their emotions or what's happening internally. So I think that both of you guys being able to externally process what's happening internally is a beautiful thing and needs to be happening more. It's a skill, though.
And I'm so happy you said that, because it kind of goes what we said initially in regards to models. T.D. Jakes pretty much said in the sermon about models that kids don't follow words, they follow models. So as men, oftentimes we struggle to put our hand on a model of someone who processed externally, or someone who took a break and didn't feel guilty, or took a break without it being because of frustration or exhaustion. I
mean, that's good, because it also comes down to, as a young one, it's conditioning, right? We're conditioned to not feel, to not express our thoughts and emotions from a very young age, right? There's, if I'm, again, transparent and all the way just real, there is a level of frustration at times when my son is overly sensitive, right? Or overly communicative about his feelings in the moment, because again, I was taught, man up, toughen up, right? But when you know better, you do better, right? And when you're married to a therapist, you sometimes don't have a choice but to do better. But it's teaching you the language and the words to express your feeling. If you're feeling sad, say you're sad.
Yeah.
If you are emotional about something, express that emotion.
Yeah.
So those are the things we're teaching our son.
Yeah.
But for me, that takes adjustment.
Yeah.
Because
You're teaching him while you're teaching you.
yeah, because in the midst of it, of that growth for him of showing emotion and being vulnerable, I'm also in a growing period, if you will, because I'm like, it takes everything in me to say, man, stop crying.
Yeah.
Toughen up.
Yeah.
Right? But again, I want to be that model for him.
Yeah.
And I have to work to get to that place of being a model that I've never seen.
Yeah.
But what were you gonna say?
I don't want to cut you off.
Well, I was just gonna say, showing the imperfection in that moment, that you don't have to have it together before you attempt and try.
Yeah.
I think that in and of itself is teaching both you and Jace that it's okay to be imperfect, but to still be working towards the progress that you want to see one day.
Yeah.
Because as adults, we feel this overwhelming pressure to have it all together before we demonstrate, before we model, before we step into that space.
Yeah.
But that's part of the process.
And that's the model.
Yeah.
And that's
The model is transparency.
Yeah.
The model is the process.
Yeah.
The process of healing.
Yeah.
It's
And-
Good.
no, that's good. We all got
That's
these
the
thoughts.
hashtag.
We all got these.
Hashtag,
We all got
the
these
model
thoughts.
is healing.
And Tez, I want you to go because I have a thought that may transition us to another conversation or to talk about something that's a little different.
Yeah.
But it triggered me and made me think of it. So go ahead.
All right. Now it went away, but I'm going to talk about it because I'm going to get it. I'm gonna fight. All right. So hearing everybody pretty much comment on what your transparent moment, it goes back to what Janelle said earlier in regards to that sensitivity. But it's going to be challenging for me to be sensitive to something that I'm uneducated on. And uneducation is simply now attached to awareness. Does it make sense? Like it's going to be impossible for me to be sensitive of a woman not having a safe space if I'm not educated on the fact that, guess what? They feel as if there is no safe space. Does it make sense? So what has happened, and not to box us in, but what has happened, I know in our culture, is that pattern has been passed down when it comes to men that what? You don't talk about your feelings. You don't cry. Does it make sense? So it requires us now to create a new pattern, which is what? Hey, it's okay to be, we can use the word sensitive, because sensitive doesn't have to be a feminine term.
Yeah, correct.
It's okay to have be a man and hold the ability to articulate your thoughts, or articulate your
Absolutely.
emotions without feeling like as if you got to shrink because you're saying, "Ow, that hurts."
But I also
good.
think that a thing that plays into it is ability to receive.
Mm.
So for being a female of color, it's so hard to articulate everything that's happening internally for you and for your children and for your spouse. It puts this undue responsibility to be able to process everything that's happening internally for self and everyone around and put to words and to figure out how to navigate everybody's needs. And to me, that is overwhelming, you know? And so if I find the words to articulate what the needs are, can you receive it without it impacting your ego? If God created us to be a voice and to give that other perspective, that missing piece, that Ezer Kenegdo, that I am the rib, this thing that completes the picture, I give perspective that you don't have. I was created to give perspective that you don't have. When I give the perspective, do you receive the perspective as an insult? Do you need to defend your position, or can you understand that God gave you this additional perspective? And so I think it is a willingness to walk towards challenge. And so, and I know like my husband would not want me to talk about this in too much detail, but I am proud of his willingness to walk towards challenge. Even when he may disagree and we debate, because I'm a strong D personality, so we might debate. Because if it's something I believe strongly that he has to get, then I'm going to keep fighting. And he's going to keep fighting. And we're both then fighting because we're determined to get this right for our kids. We don't want these models to keep being passed down. We don't always get it perfect, but we are trying and we are fighting.
Well, and it makes me think about, and what came to mind for me, and I can't remember exactly what you said, but your comments also kept the thought ruminating, if you will, within me, and that is this transition, right, of going from not having a model and not knowing what it looks like to express feelings, thoughts, and emotions, to now wanting to be this model. I have to disconnect from that. You see what I'm saying? Just like I went through an identity crisis from sports to my career. I had to disconnect from that.
Yeah.
And within that is grievance.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I have to grieve the loss of my identity of
Wow.
football.
That's
Yeah.
good.
I have to grieve the loss of my identity to this masculine persona
Yeah.
that I was supposed to uphold, because those are real losses. That's who I was. That's
Yeah.
why I thought that I was designed to be, right? That's what I thought. That's what I thought Aaron was.
Yeah.
But now, as I want to become this new model and I want to become this new thing, I have to unattach, disassociate from those things that used to be.
It reminds me of spiritually losing
Yeah.
yourself.
Mhm.
Like to lose yourself to gain the world, you know,
Yeah.
and like it's still grievance and the feeling of loss. You still got to acknowledge the fact that you experience a loss.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I know we talked about, you know, initially within the conversation, we were kind of talking about grief a little bit. And there's a process to grief, right? There's phases that you have to go through. And that first phase is denial, right? It's denial, and then it's anger, and it's depression, and it's bargaining, and then it's acceptance, right? The final stage is accepting it. And think about all the things I just named.
Well, and they
that
happen
comes
out of
before
order, and
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
cycle between, you know, the
It's not a ladder.
Yeah,
Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
You
And
can
it's-
start off, you know,
yeah.
with
so,
anger.
So I mean, it's tough. So I guess the question for me then is, you know, when we talk about grief,
Oh, this is so good.
a lot of times we often talk about the loss of a loved one,
Mhm.
right? Because that's the easy focus when we talk about grief.
Mhm.
But what about the loss of a job? What about the loss of identity of who you thought you were? What about the loss of a voice,
Yeah.
right? Or
A safe place.
A safe place. What about the grieving of those things? And do people even understand that is a part of that is grief?
So I think you make a good point that you can grieve something other than the loss of a person. Like you can grieve the loss of pieces of your identity. You can. I recently grieved with the new racial awareness that everybody's experiencing. This feeling of affirmation is new to me. To have white friends and allies legitimize my perspective and my experience is new for me. And that made me emotional. And I was trying to figure out, why am I getting emotional to have someone affirm that racism is real and that it still exists? Why am I emotional about that? And I realized that I'm grieving the fact that the feeling of affirmation is so foreign to me. Why, as a black woman, is it foreign to have my experience be affirmed? I didn't know that. And so I had to take time and create space to grieve that. And it was like deep wailing that I couldn't control. Like it just kept coming and coming and coming. And I was like literally watching a meeting where people were advocating. And I'm like overly emotional because it was so deeply rooted. But I grieved that. And so I think part of sometimes why it's so hard is because there's a difference between grief and traumatic grief. You can address the grief and be moving towards healing, but if you are grieving something that's traumatic and you haven't addressed the trauma piece of it, it keeps the grief feeling like it's raw. It feels like it never subsides. It doesn't heal because you keep trying to move through these phases and you feel stuck in the phases because the trauma is still so prevalent.
That's good.
That's real good.
Yeah. I was also thinking about the anticipatory grief that, again, not to box this in, but we experience in the Black community. Like we're training our young ones, like we talked about before. Don't put your hands in your pockets. Pull up your pants. Look someone in the eye when they're talking to you. Put your hands on the wheel when you're pulled over. Talk in this tone of voice. Because we're already anticipating the grief of not seeing that loved one walk through the door. So we're doing everything in our power that we can, all the while anticipating the worst. Because the worst we see in our face day after day after day. It's not if it happens, it's when it happens.
Wow.
And what is that point of connection going to be to me so that I can gird myself so that it's not as traumatizing? And so I think anticipatory grief really hits our culture and our community hard in a way that we're not even aware of as it's happening.
That is so powerful and profound because I literally was, and it just hit me because I have an opportunity to mentor several young men right now, young men of color. And in this, they're often getting talked at about, don't do this, don't do that, right? It's this precautionary of, we've seen this happen before, and our fears that it will happen again because we see you traveling that same path. And I've never thought about it as anticipatory grief, right? of us already grieving these young men, or the thought of them doing these things because we've seen it before,
or passing that
or
to them.
passing it to them.
Because then they are expecting the worst to happen because they need to be prepared for it.
That's good.
It is anticipatory grief.
And here's a question. How do you educate without projecting that onto the child? Is there a way?
That's what I was thinking. I'm
You're
like,
gonna make
I was
a lot of
waiting.
money.
I was waiting.
Yeah, yeah, it's hard because you
That's the
can't.
challenge that we
Yeah.
face daily. It's like, I don't want to project this onto my child, but at the end of the day, I want him to come home.
Yeah,
So how do I educate without projecting?
and what happens when the community is grieving?
Mm.
Both actual and anticipatory losses. If you're honest right now, what is your level of anticipatory grief for the next killing?
Oh, yeah.
Mm.
You know, it's just a matter of days before it's on all over social media and on your newsfeed.
I was on my lunch break today and got a text about a lynching that happened in Bloomington, Indiana,
I seen that.
over the weekend. When you
Wow.
think of lynching,
It was an
Attempted?
it was
attempted
attempted lynching
Yes.
in Bloomington, Indiana. And the idea that we're saying lynching in the context of 2020. And I watched it on my lunch break because I wanted to give witness to this young man's
Yeah.
experience, and then repost and say, this is what you can do, because the police did not feel like in that moment that they would arrest the individuals who perpetrated that lynching. And so that awareness, but this is during my lunch break, and I'm reading it and seeing videos about an
Yeah.
attempted lynching.
I seen that this morning. But guess where I was at 1:00 this morning? In Bloomington. Because I came from Tennessee. So when I seen that this morning, oh man, that messed me up so bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the trauma of hearing on the news that, first of all, on the southeast side of town, because that's how it's going to be talked about, as those shootings only take place on the southeast side of town. And it's always got to be grouped together under this grouping of this certain side of town. When it's any other crime, it's not reported like that. But on the southeast side of town, there's been another shooting, and the name hasn't been released yet. And you're waiting. Because you know that you know the person, you just don't know how closely you know the person. So you numb out emotionally until you get the name, and then you still try to numb yourself so that you don't feel it. It's this bracing for the worst. That's not normal. You can't experience that. Even if you don't feel it, your body still feels that. And the fact that that's a normalized experience for too many of us, that is the problem. This is why healing is important. We're not designed to live in those conditions.
So as you talk about healing, and as we bring this conversation to an end, I want to talk about what healing looks like in the presence of grief, right? What does support look like for individuals who are grieving, who are in the grievance process, whether it be due to the loss of a loved one, whether it be to the loss of a job, or all the other things that we've talked about today? What does that look like from a healing or a supportive standpoint, whether it be from mental health counselors and social workers, or whether it just be from someone who wants to be by an individual's side? What does that look like?
Of course, I'm biased because I'm a therapist, but I really feel like seeking support is the first step for a lot of healing. If it's a small thing that you're trying to get over and heal, your body will heal itself. Your body is designed to heal itself. You get a cut on your arm, it's going to heal itself. Okay? You don't have to say, heal. Come on, heal. You can do it. It's going to heal itself. If you walk out of your house and you almost sever your arm off, almost cut your arm off, it doesn't matter how. If you did say heal, 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 it's not going to happen. You have to go get an intervention. And then once you get it cleaned and get those stitches, then your body will heal itself. But you need the intervention first so that the healing can happen. Therapists are not masters on your life. They can't fix everything in the world, but they can provide an intervention that can then put you on the right track towards healing. And so, of course, I'm a huge proponent for therapy, being a therapist, but it's oftentimes the first step towards healing. Not to minimize praying. Let me be clear. Jesus and therapy. Quisha.
Say it.
Yeah.
Preston, I'm at you.
Yes.
To just piggyback off of there or make a comment, I don't know if this is a question or not, but I think that it is also important for us to experience it. A lot of times we mask it as I'm okay, or trying to be strong for other family members, whatever it is, the loss. But really experiencing it, being okay with crying or being angry, experiencing those emotions before you try to run to healing. If we go biblical, that confession piece is important. A lot of times we say, God says, or people use the term, "I'm too blessed to be stressed," or something like that. So we mask it like, "Well, I can't be stressed," and it's like, that's not normal. Like you're going to have some stresses. So experiencing that and being okay with, okay, I'm sad right now, or I'm angry, whatever it is. Experience that, but don't stay in there. Don't stay in that space, and that's when you go seek that help.
And if Jesus is the model and he wept, how can we think that we won't feel?
Yeah.
So as we bring the conversation to an end, I'm gonna sit up for this part. But as we bring this conversation to an end, as a team, as Courageous Healing Inc., our call to action for those of you who are joining us for these courageous conversations, our call to action is to seek help. Yes, trust God, right? Jesus and therapy.
Get that therapy.
But we have to do the work. We have to do our own work. We have to seek professionals, just as we would see a doctor for our physical needs. We have to seek professionals for our mental health needs. But I'll also go as far as saying this as well. Not only do individuals who are not in the field need to be seeking help, but also those of us who are in the field, we feel as well.
Mm-hmm.
We have our own traumas, our own grievances, and we also have to seek help. So as therapists, we need therapists.
Mm-hmm.
So that's our call of action for those of you out there watching with us. And we hope to see you again for another courageous conversation.